Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Returning to the show tonight is Jamie Lee. Jamie is a relentless truth seeker and soon-to-be author of his first book about the flat Earth, where he takes the reader through why geocentrism is truth and how the power brokers led by the Jesuits are behind the heliocentric lie. Details about purchasing Jamie's book can be found on his website, aplaintruth.info. The discussion with Jamie is wide-ranging as we talk about the progress of the flat Earth awakening and how FE is challenging institutionalized paradigms put in place by the puppet masters to keep humanity ignorant of our true history and origins. And so without further ado, here's Jamie. All right, Jamie, so welcome back to the show. The last show that I did with you and Bruce was the show on the Jesuits, and it did really, really well. And I did receive a number of emails from folks that were blown away by it. And one person wrote me, in fact, and said that it was probably the best show they had listened to with regard to the Jesuits and the power structure and all that. So, and that is because of you and Bruce, not because of me. I was basically learning like everybody else when I was talking to you guys. But you are finishing up, or have you finished a book on the flat Earth? Where are you with that?
Hi, Mike, and thanks again for having me on your show. I'm between scared to death and about to send it to the publisher. Because I've never done anything like this. And I just told you on the pre-chat here that I flunked English in high school, and if I don't get this one right, this will go to the grave with me. But it's an important subject that needs to get out there. It's a mind-opening subject, and it ties in completely with the Jesuits story. And I just like to say, first of all, that my buddy Bruce, who couldn't be here tonight, my heartfelt wishes for you and your family. And they're going through a tough time now with all the toxicity in their world. Their family's under attack in Connecticut, and wish you the best, buddy, and get back and let's do another show with Mike, okay? And Mike, your courageousness for putting the show out, I completely, you're the tripod with us to make the show happen and get the word out. And I've got over 20,000 views on the show on my website as well. So we're starting to learn, and we're all in this together. It's the mind opening of the beginnings of a new thought process connecting to ancient cosmology that's been around for 5,000 years that we've never been taught about. We're just learning about it. So it's a wonderful opportunity to those with open minds and abilities to conceive that there's been this great deception, conspiracy, as I'm calling it, conspiracy, that history says there's either history by accident or history by conspiracy. And if you take the history by accident, everything is always true. But if you take the conspiratorial and look under the covers, because if you see a politician's lips moving, they're lying, and everybody agrees with that, well, then you're finding these deep stories that were being accessed that we couldn't get because of the internet. And as we were talking about before the show, the Mayan calendar prophesies this exact time between the two hemispheres of the Milky Way, where our right and left hemispheres of ourselves, as above, so below, is connecting this consciousness. And even average day Joes like you and me who are blessed to be able to have access to this information have wanted to know, and like all the rest of you, we're wanting to know. It's not an ego-based thing. It's a quest for information and knowledge. And we're only using 15% of our brains anyway. So people that say they know, I don't know how they can say that. There's so much to learn. So much to learn.
There is so much to learn. I was just going to say, Jamie, that with all the stuff that you're putting out there and I'm putting out there, it's basically the tip of the iceberg. But before, we didn't have a tip, and so now It's starting to pick up momentum. And it's really interesting to me that something like the flat Earth, as an example, has become a major catalyst in waking people up. As much as there's so many out there still that want to knock it and make fun of it and all that, the truth of the matter is it has picked up tremendous momentum, and it's making people ask a lot of very good pressing questions. And what I'm seeing is that the power structure, they are responding to this now. In other words, they're backpedaling. And so when they have to start responding to it, and when they have to start doing a counterpoint on the information that's presented with regard to flat Earth, you're picking up ground. That you're winning something in this process.
Did you have an aha moment, or was like me a slow discovery into the realization that, wow, this is a big deal?
Oh, with the flat Earth? Yeah, well, it was, I guess, about 2 years ago when Mark Sargent put his little videos out. And I didn't take him seriously, to be honest with you. When it came into my YouTube feed, and I was already doing the shows, it popped up, and I wasn't even going to look at it, to be honest with you. I just looked at it, I'm like, oh, what is this? And something in the back of my mind, Jamie, was saying, Mike, just press the play button. Just play it.
Really?
And I started watching them, and, they were addictive. And there were going to be people that are going to say that Mark was off base on this stuff, and Mark didn't get this right, and Mark had too much conjecture. Yeah, that's okay. The truth of the matter is that for me, it got the ball rolling. Now, I don't agree with now, 2 years later, I don't agree with all the stuff that Mark had in those videos. But then again, we're all 2 years down the line, 2 years smarter. And so that's how it got started for me. And I would say that probably 9 months into it, I would say that I had to take a step back, and I thought to myself, oh, you know what? I don't even want to admit this, but I think the world is flat. And I remember having a reluctance to talk to people about it because it was a paradigm that had to be broken, that I knew it was just going to be loaded up with ridicule. I knew it. And in fact,
who was the first person do you remember the first person you tested it on?
Well, there was one person in my family that initially that we had a discussion over it, and they entertained it a little bit in the beginning, and then quickly after that, they wanted no part of it. And so that caused a lot of friction, unfortunately. But so that was the first person that I had a discussion with. But the first person that I had a real discussion about that was open was my partner, Rebecca. And I remember that I had put in the queue to watch on TV. I use Plex, which is I can queue up YouTube videos and watch them on my television. And I said, hey, I've got some videos that I think you might be interested in. And she goes, oh, what are they about? So I said, well, it's about the flat earth. And she just stopped. I'll never forget this, Jamie. She looked at me and she said, Mike, now you've gone too far. So, right. But she did it in a nice way.
She had been supportive all the way before that, right? She'd been totally supportive of your work.
Yeah, she was very supportive, but the look on her face was very perplexed. I remember that. But look, to her credit, she said, okay, let's watch them. And so we did. And when we did that and afterwards, we started queuing up more and more flat earth material. And now she's completely on board. So it was one of those things where she had an open mind. She was like, okay, look, all right, this doesn't make sense to me. This cuts across the grain. This is not what we were taught. It seems ridiculous, but you know what? I'm going to go with it. Let me see what this is about. And like I said, I have to full credit to her, to Rebecca, for doing that, because there's so many people that won't do it. They won't even touch it. They won't go there. They'd rather throw rocks and ridicule and make fun of the people that are bringing this information forward. Look, I tell people all the time, whether you believe it or not, it's mind-provoking. It's going to get the critical thinking going, or it should, if you're not completely asleep. But even with that logic, you just still can't win people over. They'll just walk from it and think that we're crazy. So what about yourself?
Well, yeah, and just to add a quick to that, it's just we're so numb. I call it run to numb with all the bread and circuses and stuff. We don't have room for any new thoughts. And since it's such a brand new thought to us, you notice when you say something to them, I always know right away if I've got them, if they start to laugh. And laughter is kind of like when you don't know what you do is you default to a laugh. Kind of like that.
Yeah.
so you can kind of, it's just a practice now to get the word out. It's like inward yoga going out. You're trying to get this out that, once you've learned this hidden secret that's 500 years been kept and you've got the key to it. Now, it's our responsibility, the ability to respond, to get it out there. And it's hard to do, but I'm the kind of, Eric Dubé, that's what kind of led me here with, I was following him on his books with Atlantean Conspiracy, and then he came up with a beautiful book on spiritual science. And there's this kid, 31 years old, and all of a sudden at 32 in September of 2015, he comes out and says dinosaurs don't exist. Yeah. And he made a heck of a case. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then 2 months later, he comes out with the Flat Earth Conspiracy. And so I picked up the book right after and I go, what's this? I get on a plane to Maui with my son. And I'm reading the book talking about the Earth spinning underneath me, and I'm thinking on the plane going, this makes no sense whatsoever. So, my son and I spent all nights just on the computers. And then as soon as I got home, there's like 6-8 books waiting for me, and all these old books from these wise people, these people that knew and were trying to stop the charade back in the 1850s when they first started planting the story out there, the robot, the lady blondes, and my favorite is Gerard Hickson, who says dethrone kings, Gerard Hickson. And he ended up standing on a soapbox in North Carolina and shouting at people about flat Earth because no one would believe him because Einstein was the man of the time. These are our forefathers that Eric used that material from to promote the book. And they happen to let the cat out of the bag. And I somewhat disagree a little bit about this flat Earth being kind of this accidental history. I think it's conspiratorial in that, we have what was the movie Men in Black, which is a movie about the Jesuits. That was in 1999 talking about the flat Earth. And then we got Obama talking flat Earth in 2010 and John Kerry talking flat Earth in 2011, 14. I mean, this book didn't come out until 2015. It wasn't on anybody's radar, but nevertheless, the cat's out of the bag. Some of these other people are, I think limited hangouts and whatnot, but the real people show up. The real people talk about Jesuits and pedophiles and flat Earth and have no problem having an open mind. And I think we're in this age of the new skeptic, like the old skeptics who just led a life of inquiry, led a life of investigation. And if you believe, you're lying. That's right. The word games they use. Like you say hi to somebody, you say hello. You're soldier, you're sold to die. These are all Phoenician words that affect our subconsciousness and our mind when we use them on each other. And that's the Luciferian, Ahriman, Baphomet, whatever name you want to give it. But that's who runs the show and who's run the show for such a long time. We have to wake up to how long we've been numb and mind programmed with these professionals that have had all access to all technology about how to manipulate us. You Google brain map and you see Obama just authorized another $8.5 billion for brain mapping. Well, what are they studying? Between the ears, behind the eyes. And that amazing show, which please, everybody, please listen to Mike's show with Elena Freeland and the other lady, I'm sorry, Mike.
Elisa E.
Yeah, on the technology, the wireless, touchless torture, please. It's really important we get up to speed on that and on geoengineering. But that Scott Onstott DVD, another one you should watch called Secrets Hidden in Plain Sight. And you see that our Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Paris, everything was laid out around sacred geometry based on their Luciferian principles.
That's a great documentary.
Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah. That was great. I remember watching that, and this guy was presenting, and he went here, and he went there, and he mapped this, and he mapped that. I remember thinking to myself, I don't think you did that all by yourself. Right. Because it was so intricate. It was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. You watch that documentary, unless you do not have a brain in your head, you will walk away, and you will know that all of this was planned. Everything is planned. It's one of those things where you're going to bump up against material and people that are going to add pieces to the puzzle. And then later on, you might decide that maybe that person, okay, I've had my share of them, or they've given me as much information as I need. In other words, it basically becomes, I guess, an economies of scale type of thing where you're not going to get any more out of them. So you've got to move to the next level.
We're moving on now. I mean, this is big boy stuff and big girl stuff. I mean, so you have to be pretty strong and have a very strong intestinal fortitude and want to know these lies. And then when you find out, you're going to have to learn to do something about it, because that's the responsibility of your consciousness rising. It just gets tougher. I mean, it doesn't get easier. It just means you have more of a mountain to move, but you can see bigger the mountain what you're dealing with. And if we can, Mike, I'd like to get into a little bit of this, because there's a beauty to this too that I want to share. And I don't know if you know Michael Meade, the modern mythologist. You know his work at all?
Yes, a little bit.
Michael Meade.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a book called Fate and Destiny, but he says maybe the hero's journey has taken us far enough, and the time has come for a different mythic imagination to rise and offer multiple approaches to the many dilemmas and complicated problems in our world today. Whereas the hero's journey tends to be conceived as a courageous search in a distant lands, the genius myth involves a turn within that leads to a sense of self, but also a return to the origin of our lives. Tesla, everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. So the simplicity, and then, getting into the different cosmologies that the Egyptians, the Vedics, the Chaldeans, the Sumerians, the Nordics, the Vikings, the Aztecs, the Cherokees, the Mayans, the Toltecs, they all had flat earth cosmology. And we're never taught one day of this in school. Nobody knows anything. Here, the Egyptian cosmology. The ancient Egyptians believed the ground was a more or less flat disk that floated upon none, the primordial ocean from which creation had begun in time immemorial, and out of which the Nile continued to flow. The sky was a solid, dome-shaped thing and was often said to be the belly of a goddess, typically Nut or Hathor, whose body arched over the earth with her feet on one horizon and her hands on the other. Her midsection was held aloft in the air by God's shoe. Sounds pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, and you know something? This is ubiquitous, Jamie, across the ancient texts and ancient, going back to the ancients. And modern mainstream education wants you to believe that all of these ancient civilizations were just hunters and gatherers, and they were clicking rocks together to start a fire, just so that you can just discard any of the stuff that, if anybody does do research, you just discard it as it's completely in the realm of what they refer to as mythology. Although I will argue that mythology, true mythology, is not fiction. There's a lot of truth, nonfiction, and metaphors and analogies that are used in order to communicate and present information. But of course, today, nobody knows any of that. So they just chalk it up as just a bunch of wild-haired storytelling that took place a long time ago. And it can't compete with today, because today, this is the technology age. This is the age of information and so on. So it's very interesting that you're on that point, because the more we go
Mike,
back...
let me just break you right there and just ask you one question, which will destroy the thing you just said completely. Just one question.
Yeah.
How'd they build the pyramids?
Oh, I know.
That's it. So if you go into this mythology, didn't exist, didn't happen. I mean, give me a break, guys. What do we have for knowledge recording today? Thumb drives? I mean, if you don't stop and think these ancients had so much more knowledge than us and respect and awe of what they've left behind for 5,000 years that we still can't figure out today.
Right.
The 13 acres of Giza it's only just like slightly off, and it's on fill, where they dragged these stones, 2.3 million of them, and laid it in perfect alignment with the heavens. I mean, we've lost contact with our as above by purpose. The light pollution of the cities. They're putting rubber soles under our shoes. I know you did the show on the Beatles.
Right.
I don't know if you covered the fact that Theodore Adorno, the Tavistock Institute guy who wrote the Beatles songs, celebrated the putting rubber under everybody's feet with the Keds and Converse shoes with the album Rubber Soul, disconnecting us from the Earth's vibration. And now everybody wears rubber, and no wonder our consciousness can't ascend. But the ancients knew, and they knew of here's ancient Vedics. I mean, the oldest language we have. Herto, son of Neph, born of an egg, descended upon in the highest heaven. He was a most gracious Lord, and in deference to smote against the rocks of heaven. So when the egg was broken, one half the shell ascended, the other half became the foundation of the world. I mean, it's in our cosmology. Here's Nordic. They're held in the branches and roots of the world tree. You get Darasil, which is the tree of knowledge and wisdom. They all had the central roots of the tree, and it went across the pond all the way to the Toltecs, the Tibetans. They believed in a geocentric cosmology, a mandala-like world system of concentric ocean and mountain ranges surrounded by an axis, Mount Meru. Mount Meru being the North Pole.
Right.
The yin and the yang of the Chinese being a flat geocentric and umbrella-like covering surrounded it was similar to the beliefs of the Greeks, East Indians, and the Aboriginal people of the Americas. The Chinese astronomers believed the heavens takes its body from the yang, so it is round and in motion, and then the earth takes its body from the yin, so it is a flat and quiescent. The brilliant astronomers of China held this unchanging belief until the Jesuit astronomer missionaries came to China in the 17th century. Who would have guessed? But who would have known that the church was in on it all the time? And that's what I'm writing about in my book, covering the 500 years between the story of Copernicus through Newton through Einstein, which all had Jesuit backings. Newton's book, the fourth edition, was a Jesuit writing. Einstein, Jorge Lemaitre, the priest, wrote the Big Bang Theory. What's a Jesuit priest writing the Big Bang Theory for? And why is the Pope talking about the Big Bang Theory being part of creation now? I mean, what is going on here, folks? So maybe this is part of their plan, Mike, to let us in now, but of a big secret, but at the same time create this controversy and more division, like the LBGT and the Black Lives Matter and all that other divisiveness, while the magicians are doing this with this hand, they're dividing us over here with this other hand, which is really why I think the Flat Earth movement started, was to get that division going. But boy, they let a cat out of the bag here, man.
Yeah, it's interesting, because that is something that you hear, is that the Flat Earth is essentially controlled opposition. But I agree, Jamie, that the cat is really out of the bag. And people sometimes believe that these people, I'll refer to them as the controllers, that they're infallible, that they don't make mistakes. Now, they're very good at what they do, but that doesn't mean they don't make mistakes. And I think the flat earth is one of those areas where they made a mistake. As far as I think they underestimated the degree in which it would take off.
Well, one of the problems we have with this, Mike, is nobody's educated about how cosmology of a geocentric or heliocentric even goes.
That's
Nobody
right.
knows that the Earth is even spinning at 1,000 miles an hour according to the heliocentrics, or that it's going 1,000 miles a second around the sun, traveling some 533 million miles in 1 year to come back to your birthday. And just mind. Let's do some mind thoughts. This is something for people that they can just do in their mind or do in the sky, and just look and see for themselves. And what kind of intelligent creation would stick something 93 million miles away to warm up a little blue ball?
Right.
And then if this blue ball is 4 times this other little gray thing, that all of a sudden this colored gray is reflecting warm and golden onto Earth evenly from a round ball with no hot spot. How does that work? But why doesn't the big blue ball, and this isn't something I'm going to write about after I get this book out, if the Earth is 4 times the size and much more reflective in the color blue than it is in gray of the moon, why doesn't the Earth's reflection take over the moon?
That's a good point.
And if gravity, according to Newton, is supposed to move our oceans up and down twice a day from the lunar, pull of gravity, but we go up 130 miles in space allegedly, and we walk around in space, and we're escaping Earth's gravity. How can something, if size matters, if gravity is size and gravity is density, but gravis, which is the etymology of the word weight, it was never used by Newton, how can something 4 times smaller with 1/6 the gravitational pull move our oceans up and down twice a day, laying on its back at 23.5 degrees, spinning at 1,000 miles an hour? How does it not move the lakes? Well, size matters, they say. Then they came up with the thing gravitrons, and we started getting into that. So, we're seeing the movement move. I don't think the getting back to your thing about if this is a conspiracy, that B.O.B., the rapper, could get Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist, the shill for NASA, on Comedy Central the next night to respond to this huge movement that's gained on the internet with Gawker.com, would move them to respond to us. Nah, it's just games, man. They're just playing. They're just wanting us to keep going. But they're raising our consciousness, those with open minds. And those with the ability to see are starting to see a whole different cosmology. And this is what's another beautiful thing about it, is this whole creation, whatever way you want to call it, is centered around our gaining experience in this lifetime.
That's right.
How powerful are we that they have to pull this 500-year scam on us all? Now we're waking up, folks. Like you said, they can't put the cat back in the bag. So now what are we going to do about it? And it always starts with education. So, for this lifetime, I'm just going to promote myself to still trying to get the word out about this and educating people in my research, but not owning it in any way, but just being open-minded that, we're all just learning here and we're all just using less than 15% of our brain. So let's hook up with each other and celebrate. I think I was just looking it up before you called. We have over 222 Flat Earth YouTube channels and hundreds of Flat Earth websites that I list on my website to celebrate everybody that's waking up. And so we share it on the internet, but that's the next step, is starting to bring it down to earth and bringing it into your hood and your community. And when the book comes out, I'm going to go out and tour, and I'm probably going to have to wear some protective clothing. But I'm really happy with this book. It's a really solid book. I'm going through the history, the cosmology, the theocosmology. I've got all the biblical translations. I mean, I wanted to get the name Bible in there, and thank you, Mike, for helping with the title and get that in, because I know the Christians, if the Christians were to wake up that they've been lied to by their church for so long, we could have a coalition that is powerful. It would cause dissension in the church for a while, but there's a real dissension that has to go on, and the Christians have to come aboard and wake up and understand that they've been had by their own supposedly brothers in the cloth, and that there is this Christian story of cosmology, and not just Christian story, but a Quran. I mean, you go to the Quran, I put a bunch of Quran quotes in there as well. Right. And then I go into, the stories about the flat earth. The sun is really moving, guys. Sorry to break anybody's bubble, but it is moving across the sky. You ask a 7-year-old, do you see the sun move? And they say yes. I was with some 5th graders today, and I said, why do they call it a sunrise? And they said, because the sun is moving. And I said, yes, but you're going to be told differently. So that's my little way of planting a seed, That's what I try and do. I try and think of creative ways. And this is what the movement is getting now. I mean, these guys on What in the World Flat Earth News. I mean, my hat's off to these guys. I think they're in England somewhere. They don't have any email. You don't contact them, but they're posting everything on Flat Earth. So are you. You're posting all this great stuff. And I glean off of you. You glean off of me. We glean off of them. You are me. We are he. And we are all together, right?
Right. Goo goo gajoob. I was thinking about that the other day, Jamie, with everything that's going on, not to digress just a little bit here, everything that's going on in the political arena today, right? I was thinking to myself, the mainstream media is having a lot of difficulty competing with you and me and everybody else that's putting information out there, because by ourselves, we might be small, but coming together collectively, it's not small. And I do believe we've gotten to the point where we are overwhelming them with information, because as more and more people now are waking up. I mean, I could say one thing about this political process that we've been seeing over the last year and a half or so is the fact that people that were completely asleep in a coma, many of them have just shaken their head a little bit and said, well, wait a minute. This is not the way it's supposed to work. We're talking about the whole process, the nomination process, the political process.
Right.
And so what's happening is these people now, they're now exploring and going out. They're finding your website. They're finding my website. They're finding other people's websites, and they're starting to pull this information in now. So whereas before might have been, or not even, I'm not even going to say may have been, we were viewed as out there, crazy, tinfoil hat wearers. That is crumbling now. And more people are looking at the stuff that you're putting out, that I'm putting out, and others are putting out. So I think what's happening now is, like I said, collectively, we have quite an army of folks out there that are putting information out, pumping it out, and it's starting to have an impact. It's starting to have an effect. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and it's exciting to see it grow from, I don't know if you're into Malcolm Gladwell and his book on tipping point and whatnot, where I was in Wall Street for 25 years and playing stocks all the time. So I saw stocks come, go, companies start, come, go. I saw the internet come, go. I mean, come and keep going. So this is happening very much like an organic growth of a consciousness rising in a collective beehive. And it kind of dovetails with when they asked the Dalai Lama, well, who's going to be the next Dalai Lama after him? And he says, well, it might not be someone, it might be someone's mind or someone's consciousness coming together with other consciousness.
Yeah.
And it's more of a Aquarian type of concept of our minds expanding, but we're not in this earth grounding time anymore. We're uprooted. We're in the mind time of this uncertainty. But in the uncertainty is this awe and wonderment again, where we get back to recreate and recreate and create. And so we're seeing on the internet, I love every day because all these guys are coming out with all these different ways to call bullshit, if I can say it on this show.
Yeah.
On the heliocentric theory. I was in Wall Street. I can go there if you want. But it's just amazing to see how creative and all the ways they're just putting it to. And this is the art. You don't see any protest songs anymore. You don't see any anti-war movement anymore, Michael. There's no anti-war movement.
Right.
And we're $20 trillion in debt. We're in serious trouble. Geoengineering, biggest subject you could talk about, much bigger than flat Earth. But in the awakening is this realization that we've been around for a long time and we're just 500 years out of the dark ages. This is the time of a great awakening for those that want to go from the edge of the ocean and looking at those huge waves, but knowing that once they get past those waves, you got open seas, baby.
Right.
You're going to float your boat like you've never gone before into places you've never gone. So it's only for the courageous that are stepping up now. They're going to get on the back of our work and say, oh, yeah, I've been on flat Earth forever. That's the old Gandhi thing. First they ignore you, then they ridicule you. And I think we're at the ridicule stage. And everybody forgets the third out of the four. And the third one is you got to fight.
Right.
We got to take it to NASA and call them out as being a military operation, which they are supporting the geoengineering program. And NASA was founded by, as you know, Werner von Braun, a Nazi war criminal who came around in the Operation Paperclip through the Joints of Staff of the United States government with the knowledge of the president, and over 20 years brought in 3,000 of what we call the worst of the worst scientists. And, we're still doing torture today.
Yeah.
But Werner von Braun ran the Apollo space program. Through Apollo, he ran the Saturn rockets with the big lie. And on his gravestone, he cites, and I don't know the biblical site, but it talks about the firmament.
Yes.
He was telling you that it was happening. And then the other guy was a guy which nobody really talks about, the first NASA administrator in 1958, which is the same year they shut down the Antarctic when they started finding out that they had a dome on their hands, was a guy named John Glennon, who before that was a movie producer at Paramount Studios, the maker of Star Trek, and before that worked for the U.S. Navy in Connecticut, the underwater lab testing for the U.S. Navy. That was this guy's training to start in NASA.
We should also not forget about Jack Parsons, right? Jack Parsons.
Well, if you want to get into Disney and Jack Parsons and Alex Crowley, yeah, we can get into that as well.
Right,
I mean,
right.
it's all secret societies. It's all these deep, dark states, as we call them.
Yeah, they're occultists.
Yeah. Well, but George Washington wore the Masonic apron.
Right.
But where the Jews get blamed for this, we've got to take it over to the Jesuits and how they still have the largest and longest owners of telescopes and observatories since the beginning. Why would the Roman Catholics be so interested in science? Well, they're also the ones that sponsored the Gutenberg Bibles back in the 1450s. They're the ones that held all the information during the Dark Ages. So they should be the ones that should be examined of how this story could have gotten so far down the road, right?
Right.
I don't know if you want to get into this yet, but...
You want to talk about the Jesuits?
Well, I want to get into the history because I think it's important. I put this together, and I think it's important work to bring the dates, and I'll just go through it fairly quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
How deep and how vast the Jesuit influence is on the entire story of heliocentrism from the beginning. So let's start with the telescope, since I was talking about that. Johann Kepler in 1611 first constructed the first telescope since Galileo, and it was constructed with the help of Father Christopher Scheiner between 1613 and 1617. The Galilean design used in early telescopes was discarded because Kepler-Scheiner telescope provided a dramatic improvement in the field. And this is in the 1600s. Niccolo Zucchi demonstrated telescope effect to be achieved using parabolic mirrors. Father Greinberger developed a way of mounting telescopes superior for any serious amateur astronomer today. It's still used. Isaac Newton considered Scheiner's work on optics important enough to obtain a personal copy for his library. The first telescope in North America was a gift presented by the Jesuits in 1646 to John Bourdon, an engineer in New France. The first telescope in China was brought there by Johannes Schreck, another Jesuit. The Jesuit Jean Richard is wrongly thought to be the first to use telescopes for astronomical purposes in India. Jesuits in 1750 were often highly trained in languages and the sciences, were expected to use their technical knowledge, especially in the realm of astronomy, to win over rulers and elites around the world and convince them, by extension, of the superiority of the Catholic message. By 1750, 30 of the world's 130 astronomical observatories were run by Jesuit astronomers, and today, 35 lunar craters have been named to honor Jesuit scientists.
This would also go a long way to explain, Jamie. A lot of people will ask me, well, we have observatories, Mike. These people that are in the observatories, they're looking at the quote-unquote planets. You're going to tell me that they're not seeing what they're saying that these things are, big balls in the sky? So, what I'm hearing you saying is these observatories are owned and run and controlled by the Jesuits. And anybody looking through a telescope is not seeing Jupiter as we're shown Jupiter or Saturn as we're shown Saturn. What are they looking at in your view? Do you have an opinion on that?
I just think it's back to the conspiratorial history, is that they've central planning has controlled the message for 500 years.
Yeah.
This is part of the work I've done, is that the story, Copernicus goes back to the 1550s and 1560s when he was the first to, so quote unquote, break away from Ptolemy and the geocentric Earth-centered history that had been going on for 5,000 years. So why was the church, who was supposed to be the bad guys, all of a sudden having all these observatories, including the observatory in Roman College on Capitoline Hill? And what's Capitoline Hill? That's where the Vatican and Rome rules from. And Father Secchi, a Jesuit, was the father of modern astrophysics. So when they tell you, well, what are these guys looking at? I counter with, well, let's look at the root and the nuts and bolts and the history of how we got to the observatories, and then you'll have a much more informed question to ask. Maybe it'll change your question about, well, what are they looking at? Kind of this one-off question you always get when people don't think through what they're actually asking. We've got to have historical answers as to how we got here. And that's when I go down this a little more, in 1987, the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, the VAT, The VAT utilizes some of the most advanced and innovative optics, electronics, and mechanics available. Then they came out with this one, Michael, called the Lucifer.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, the Lucifer, the large binocular telescope, near infrared utility with camera and integral field unit for extragalactic research. And that's on the Vatican Observatory on Mount Graham in Tennessee on sacred Indian burial grounds, who they had to go to court with against the Indians of the Apache Survival Coalition and the San Carlos Apache tribe in 1991. Jesuit father George Cone, director of the Vatican Observatory, indicated that he could not find an authentic Apache who thought the mountain was sacred. Father Cone further declared the Apache beliefs were kind of a religiosity to which I cannot describe and which must be suppressed with all the force we can muster.
Wow.
Jesuit Father Charles Pulser calls opposition of the construction of the telescope complex on top of Mount Graham part of a Jewish conspiracy and comes from the Jewish lawyers, oy vey, of the American Civil Liberties Union, who are out to undermine and destroy the Catholic Church. And then before pardoning Galileo in 1992, the Vatican in 1979 set up a Galileo study group, the Pontifical Academy of Sciences College of Cardinals, to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the birth of Albert Einstein. It was Pope declaration to end the controversy with Copernicus, basically breaking bread, and that they were wrong, even though the story was the church was wrong.
Right.
So the story the church is wrong. Why is the church involved for the last 500 years with everything going on in space and all the information coming from space? So what they're looking at is just what they put in the mathematical formulas. And I don't know if you saw, Eric brought out a piece about the astronomers, and I don't remember, I have it here somewhere. Oh, here, right here. Copernicus estimated the sun to be 3 million miles away.
Yeah.
Kepler estimated it to be 12 million miles away. Newton, it matters not if it's 24 or 56 million miles away. Science will find the answer. Now we're at 93 million miles away. Yeah. And I'm hypothesizing here. I have no proof to this, but I'm hypothesizing that when the first British who set up the Royal Institute of Astronomy, where Newton was the president, and before that, Newton worked for the Queen and the Mint.
I mean, these guys you're talking about, aside from the fact that they were all tied into the Jesuit order, if you do your research on them, they're alchemists, they're occultists, and they're mystics. What people are taught in school, the kids are taught in school, as these people are scientists. And they never bring up the fact that they're occultists, mystics, and alchemists. This is who they were. So this is always very interesting to me, because you were talking about you have to bring the history in as a precursor. You just can't jump to an answer. You have to understand how something got there. And then we can have an intelligent conversation or intelligent debate.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the nuts and bolts of everything. I mean, everybody wants to do the song and dance. Like, we've hit the Titanic with climate change, as they're calling it, and stuff, and everybody wants to talk about how great the band is. There's a disconnect, a huge disconnect. But those of us that are doing the research, we're finding these gems like this one. Christopher Clavius, 1612, leading astronomer in the 16th century, a Jesuit, principal scholar behind the creation of the Gregorian calendar. So why did they come out with a new calendar? Well, the old calendar was a moon calendar. It was the feminine principle. And this is Apollo, the sun god. Why do the Roman Catholics have church on Sunday? Why do they send up a male phallic penis to impregnate Isis, the moon? Because they have to create the feminine principle in order to destroy it. That's their whole raison d'etre of the satanic principle. Creation and destruction. Shiva, Vishnu, and the Brahma. And here, Pope Clement had reacted favorably to talk about Copernicus's theories, rewarding the speaker with a rare manuscript, to a dedication to Pope Paul. So his book on the revolutions was dedicated to Pope Paul III, a Catholic. And then a Nicholas Copernicus statue in 1973 is erected on the Jesuit College and Planetarium in Poland. But the way they got us, and the way I'm kind of getting into this history, in 1650, there was a guy named they use art to tell stories. Giovanni Battista Riccoli came out with this. He was an Italian astronomer and a Catholic priest in the Jesuit order, and he came out with Almagestrum Novum, the new Almagest, which was to bury the Ptolemy's Almagest. And the book offered new insight to the state of thought about the cosmos in the 17th century. So as we're coming out of the Dark Ages, the story goes, then we come into the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. So as we're just starting to wake up, we're being told the books are being published from Latin into German, into Italian, and to these other languages where people of the common middle class can lift their boots up. And that's how the middle class kind of got started, right? That's kind of the story. No, they just wanted to tell a new story, so they started letting us have books.
Yeah.
Then they got the education system going, and they started telling us, like, how many people know where the word world comes from? And that's where people say, I know. I counter with things like, okay, what's the meaning of the word world? That's the flat Earth cosmology. But the ancients had this toroidal field. The toroidal field, the North Pole is Mount Meru, and the Antarctic Circle is the cathoid, or I may get it backwards, the cathoid, which is the positive charge, and the North Pole, Mount Meru, is anoid, the negative charge. And the ocean, the salinity, is the battery, and it creates this beautiful field of a cosmic energy, electromagnetic energy that Tesla was talking about, and used the Tesla coil to prove it, a frequency, vibration, and energy. And so they've been hiding the self-empowerment that we're connected to. So they wanted to change the story and get rid of the flat Earth story about our cosmology being self-empowerment, self-knowing, and co-creators, as I believe, in my only word you can hear me here is believe, that we're co-creators in this existence and we're here to do our work, that they came up with these two models, and the whole conversation of this front piece of Ricoli's Almagestrum Novum was discussing about whether or not we ran around the sun or the sun went around us. And they totally got rid of, Mike, the whole story about the flat Earth cosmology in that one painting. And then there's Tycho Brahe, who had a better elliptical, figured out the elliptical, and he was a Jesuit. All these guys are linked, and then they just buried the contributions that were done by the Arabs. I mean, our math comes from the Arabs, and nobody gives them any credit. And all the constellations, many of the constellations, the Great Bear, the Small Bear, a lot of these are named after great Arabic astronomers. Well, as we went down the road, then these guys started traveling, and in the 17th century, we have guys. These are all Jesuit astronomers. Matteo Ricci, who went to China and missions in the 1600s. Francis d'Aiguillon, a Belgian mathematician and physicist, worked on optics. I mean, I got 20 names here of just the 17th century of these guys who did major work on the heavens of what's going on in the supposedly scientific, proving the church wrong community. Then you got guys like René Descartes, I think therefore I am, which introduced 17th century modern rationalism. Well, he entered the Jesuit College of Royal Le Grand at La Fleche somewhere, and introduced into mathematics and physics, and included Galileo's work. The first vaccines, the pioneer of smallpox and father immunology. Edward Jenner was a Society of Jesus Jesuit. He was the first to associate human disease with animals, and he created smallpox. He's the creator. From cowpox, he created smallpox because the age-old legend of old wives' tales had turned it into scientific fact.
I'm sorry, Jamie, let me just ask you a question now. So we're going through all these names, and so some of the listeners are probably sitting there thinking, well, this is unbelievable. I mean, this is a stranglehold it's been in place for thousands of years. How do we break this? I mean, are we really making a dent in this thing? I mean, in the beginning, we said that we think we've got them backpedaling, especially on the flat Earth stuff. But how do we answer a question when somebody says, wow, what you're explaining here is that this is so embedded, it's so entrenched that how are we going to break the back on this thing? So how do you respond to something like that?
I think we're doing. I mean, it's just going to take time. I mean, everybody waits for the echo like, okay, is it all better now? I mean, we're into instant gratification in this lifetime, and it doesn't work like that. This is our karma. This is our work to do. Karma means action. It's about what you do with what you have. Start somewhere, use what you got, do something. I just started opening these doors, and then I moved out to the country because I said the world's gone mad, and I knew that the capitalists capitalizing when I used to work on Wall Street was going to take everybody away, because I'd sit in rooms and they just talk about human resources, people they took advantage of. Yep. And I knew it was exponential in that they're going to come out with 300 more GMO vaccines in the pipeline. So our rights are going to be taken away. And I went out to the country and I said, well, I just can't sit here with this knowledge and not start getting it out. So contrarian completely to my first move, I started my first blog, Taboo, Tabu blog.com, because I was learning about so many things, starting with like 9/11, and then the energy started when oil prices got up to $147 in 2007. And I just moved to the country and said, well, I'm going to take care of myself and my family, grow food, know where stuff comes from, and throw bombs from 3 miles out at dirt road. And now I'm going to meetings and I'm speaking out, and I got these books coming out, and I'm just being a tool for the awakening. I mean, this is a great awakening, and we should be honored and blessed to have the role and responsibility and duty. And the duty, as my friend Dane says, to speak out on such important topics like NASA. My favorite saying now is the only thing NASA sent in space is your imagination.
That's exactly right.
But to stop for a minute, Mike, and think about what you just said, you're talking about how many billions of dollars, how long has this been going on?
Right.
How many people are, quote, in on it? And that's where everybody gets stuck. They think everybody's in on it. Do you think the guys at Lockheed that make the rockets, do they think they know that the engines drop off in the Bermuda Triangle and where they hide everything? And that's why they created the Bermuda Triangle? Do you think the guys making their paychecks, making those rockets know that? No.
Yeah, it's all compartmentalized. And that's something that people cannot get their heads around. And the example I use,
Right.
Jamie, is like you, I was in the corporate world for a long time. And in the corporate world, especially in large multinational corporations, it's all compartmentalized. It would be like asking somebody who's in the strategy department or somebody's in operations, somebody's in the finance department or the treasury department within a corporation and expecting that they're going to know everything that's being decided and everything that's being discussed in the boardroom by 5 people. They don't know. What they're doing is they're executing, they're following a strategy or a plan that's been laid out. But beyond that, they have blinders on. They're not looking left. They're not looking right. They don't have peripheral vision. And so it's the same thing with what's going on here, what you're taking us through. It's the same thing. It's extremely compartmentalized.
Yeah, and like 5 guys set the price of gold every morning in London.
Right. Or 6 people sit at a table and decide what it is you're going to see on network television or on the radio, or what's going to be printed in the newspapers.
Yeah, and so and one of the sticking points, besides all the mind control stuff you controlled, which I do believe is part of our catharsis to be an empathy. We don't have an empathy, Michael. And I really want to bring this up for a quick sec. This country has lost its empathy. If it really had it, I think probably after World War II when we thought we were the good guys and stuff. But we go off with our bombs and we go off on all these brown people since Vietnam. And we realized that was a huge mistake and we ran off with our tail between our legs. But we left 2 million people killed and all the Agent Orange. Then we go off into Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan with all our bombs and run up these massive debts on our children and kill all these brown people. And no one wants to talk about it.
Right.
No one wants to take responsibility for our role, paying your tax dollars to make those bombs, to bomb those people for weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. And there's no culpability. And what brought that up, that little rant there, I'm sorry, but it's important that people wake up, is that the CEOs never are held accountable anymore. And there used to be when I started in Wall Street, there was accountability. People did get in trouble. But the higher ups are insulated. I mean, they've been protected by their secret societies and their little Bilderberg groups and trilateral commissions, and yet I was listening to Santos Bonacci, your interview about him, and he calls them buffoons. Kind of got to turn the 3 fingers at us and call us the buffoons because they've had this over our heads for 500 years and we're just waking up to it now. So I gotta look at me and say, how come I didn't figure it out? And
when I asked the question, before, it was rhetorical about what people would say. Well, this is so entrenched, and how are we going to be able to break the back on this thing? I agree 100% with you, Jamie, that this is a process, and I tell people that there's a huge metaphysical aspect to this. That, from a spiritual perspective, we have to get our heads wrapped around. And the work that you're doing, that others are doing, myself, this is table setting for the future, for future generations. But it's very, very important that the children, our kids, our grandkids, all the way down the line, future generations, that they pick the baton up and they continue this work. So that's why it's very important to wake them up. So, you made me chuckle before when you said, I guess it was, you were talking to the school kids and you were talking to them about the flat earth. They're going to teach you something different in class. But, those are the types of things you have to do. And what I found is that, and you have to really get thick skin, folks, when you do this. You have to be strong and you have to be committed and you have to stand in truth. So when people come to me and they want to debate me on certain topics, whether it be flat earth or whatever it may be, it used to be that I would try to be a little tentative. Okay, let me see if I can do this so somebody's feelings doesn't get hurt, doesn't wind up being a big blowout. Now what I ask them is, have you researched the flat earth? Have you looked at it? Honestly looked at it? Have you researched it? And they look at me. Well, I watched a YouTube. No, I'm not asking you that. Anybody can watch a YouTube video. Have you sat down? Have you done the homework? Have you researched this? And if they just look at me and they say no, I said, then we're not going to have a discussion because you need to go off and go do some work. After you do the work, after you do the research, after you investigate and you get some knowledge, you have a knowledge base, come back to me and we'll have a conversation. Because otherwise what happens is, as you know, it just becomes a circus when you're talking to people that have done any work whatsoever. And that's a lot of people, by the way.
You're challenging something they never thought of before.
Right.
And because they were never taught it, you have to default to not appearing stupid. So you have to, like an ad hominem attack. And that's when, flat earth. Yeah, Mike, where do you get it from? Where'd you go to school, Mike? Come on, tell me about, And so they leave the subject to start attacking you.
Right.
What's your credentials to talk about this? Are you a scientist? Do you work for NASA? You're going to tell me everybody from NASA's in on this? That's the kind of people they're not the edge of the sand people I go after. But I'm finding ways, like creative ways, like once I'm learning this 5,000 years cosmology, I said, can you answer this question? For 5,000 years, there was a different cosmology than we've been taught for the last 500 years ago about our existence. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about? So, there's different ways you can approach it. And then if I find somebody that's arrogant or something and starts spouting, especially if I can find an astronomer, this is the power we have, Mike. We can go up to anybody. I go up in front of Neil deGrasse Tyson in a second. I'll go up to any of these guys and bring their actor cards with them, and talk to them about what the Earth is really, and that there really is sea level, guys.
Right.
It really is a sea level. There really is plate tectonics, and it really is an aeroplane. They've been grabbing our balls for so long. In fact, you go to court, and the word testify comes from the word testes. We used to have to literally grab your balls to testify. So here's the deal killer with all these guys, which I do, if I want to just shut the door on them, I said, look, I'll go away forever. In fact, I'll give you whatever money you want. You just show me one live cam of Earth from one of those millions of satellites they've been sending up from hundreds of thousands, getting all these pictures from quadrillions of trillions of miles away, sent on radio frequency beams up and back that tell us the shape of the orbit and the speed and the density and the relationships and how many other Earths and all this stuff on a little radio beam. I'm going to do my George Carlin. A little radio beam ends up in the Hubble telescope, and they decipher it and they tell us all this, but we can't get a cell phone call more than 15 miles away from a freaking tower.
Exactly. It's interesting you should bring that up. I had to go pick something up, and I had to go into a very rural area of North Carolina. No cell phone. No signal whatsoever. So I'm thinking to myself, gee, what, did the satellite break?
Right.
I have this conversation with folks all the time. I even explain to them that there's no satellites. It's all ground-based. You have a ground-based system. It's not GPS. It's not global positioning. It's ground-based. And it's funny, I'm finding, Jamie, though, that when I stick to my guns, which I'm pretty good at, but you've got to do it in a way in which you're not attacking people. But when you stand strong and firm in your discussion and your debate and you bring up the facts, you'd be surprised at how many people will basically at some point they'll shrug their shoulders and they'll take a step back, and what's running through their head. I've got to take a look at this because I'm looking like a fool, So, and I've had lots of conversations with people like this, and many have come back and they said, I did look at it and I'd like to talk to you about it some more, Mike. That's very different than wanting to scream and yell and carry on and jump up and down about the fact that, you live on a big ball. So I'm seeing that change. I'm seeing people now basically, well, not everybody, but there's a lot of people that I am speaking to that are taking the time out to get themselves better educated.
And you've got a source now. You've got a cumulative work and a legacy, and I've got mine as well, as long as they let us keep it up here, where we can point to our work. We don't have to defend ourselves anymore, Mike. We've got some stuff down here for whatever reason that is quality. Like one of the things I go to if I'm talking to somebody, and I listen. I try and listen to how they speak. So if they say, I see what you mean, I try and speak in the visual. If they say, I hear what you're saying, I try and speak in the audio. I feel something to do with feeling, then I talk to their feelings. And so if you're trying to reach somebody, there's a really art, as you probably know, in the Wall Street finance you work in, to how to work with different size up people quickly and understand them. Right. And then like if I get somebody that's a mathematician, I said, well, do you know what the spherical basic geometry is for the Earth's curvature? I know I got him right away. And you know this too. And so once you know the math, where it's 1 mile and the curvature should be 5.5 feet almost, 6 miles, which you can see at the ocean, standing at the beach, 10 miles side to side and about 3 miles out on a clear day, you should be able to see over 60 feet of curvature. You should see roundness in the ocean, which you do not see. And we extrapolate that up, and when we go up to not the Bonneville Salt Flats, but the Sauli de Uyuni Flats, the world's largest, which is 4,086 square miles, we should see this thing curving all over the place. Yet it's the flattest place on Earth and has a drop of only some less than 3 feet. How can that happen on a curved ball? How can the Mississippi, going over 2,000 miles, traveling from the north to the south. So this equator should be going uphill. When do you see rivers go uphill? For 2,000 miles, where for 1,000 miles, there should be, get this, 66,666 feet of curvature, or 12.26 miles.
The numbers become staggering. And that's the point I try to make to folks also, Jamie, is when I start taking them through this many miles out, you should see this.
Right.
This many more miles out, it gets even worse. You have to take them through that, because you said something earlier in this conversation. So many people do not know the basics. They do not know the ABCs of heliocentrism. They don't know that the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, and we're supposed to be rocketing around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour, and so on. They don't know this. One of the first questions I asked, I said, are you spinning around right now? I said, you're supposed to be spinning around, like in North Carolina, I looked it up. I'm supposed to be spinning around at 750 miles an hour. I said, are you spinning around right now? And they just said, look at me like, no. Okay. I said, you need to go do some homework, because there's all of these dynamics. There's all of this movement, and we're not experiencing any of it. I mean, I can look out my window on any given day here. My office looks right out my back window. I can see the trees in my yard. The leaves aren't even moving. You really have to get down sometimes to basics with folks, and you really have to bring it to a point where even the people that try to convolute it with more complex types of mumbo jumbo, I tell them, look, I'm not even going to go there, right? You need to answer these basic questions first, and then we'll talk about your pie in the sky nonsense.
I call it thought logic. Look at the first phase of the moon, and everybody in the world can do this. Look at the first phase of the moon and get out at afternoon when the sun's setting. Put your right shoulder at the sunset and look over your left shoulder at the first phase moon above you, where it's crowned in light from the top down, and the sun is over your right shoulder.
Yep.
I mean, game over, folks. If that doesn't do it for you, go get this Nikon Coolpix P900 camera. It's $1,000. Maybe you can borrow it from somebody. And these guys are posting on the internet pictures of Venus and Neptune and Mars and these beautiful light energy colors. And they're showing this kind of, and I don't know if you've seen these ones where the guy compared it to the light being underwater or behind water.
Yes, I saw that. Yep.
And that's an awakening for me that these light luminaries, as the ancients used to call them, and planet means wandering star, is these light energy beings. They're not physical. They're ascended to light to be around to help us. And they're kind of looking in from on top of the dome. We're underwater, folks. That's another hard one for people to understand. And that's why the sky is blue. It's not because, and I said, why is the sky blue? I asked, why does the Earth spin? And nobody knows why the Earth even spins at 1,000 miles an hour. You look it up under Wikipedia and it's axial tilt. And because there's no resistance, it spins like this, that in 500 years, you can set your Greenwich nano time clock that'd be 1 millisecond later, because it's in perfect spin with no resistance on its axial tilt that started after we were spit out of the sun, but magically stopped at 93 million miles, hurtling.
I know.
Oh, my gosh. They had to see, we've got them on 500 years of lies.
The evidence is overwhelming. I explain that to folks too. They talk to me like, well, what evidence, what facts? I said, look, you really need to sit down and look at it, because it's overwhelming. Okay. 2 years ago, when this thing first kicked off, it was very loose and fluid. Okay. People were just getting into it. But 2 years later, I was on another show recently the other day, and I was a guest, and I said, there are a lot of very smart people who are hardworking people doing a lot of very good research and pulling this together. And there's so much out there today that, there's no excuse, in my view, anymore for people to be walking around thinking they live on a big ball. I mean, there's no excuse for it anymore. I was just going to say, one of the questions I was going to ask you, the book, you said that you have a publisher. Are you self-publishing, or did you find somebody to actually publish the book?
No, the book isn't even ready, and I'm on your show talking about it. Okay. So anyway, so you get on CreateSpace and you get 40%. Amazon gives you 40% royalty check right into your bank account on the sales that go all around the world. They use their entire world distribution. And if you do it through your website, you get 60% commissions. And then if anybody wants to order one from me, I'll give you a 20% discount on the cover, because you have to get this information out. This book's going to be about 230 pages in color, and it's really pushes the expensive, but I wanted to do this right. So I'm doing one in color and then a much cheaper version in black and white. But If anybody wants to order one directly from me on my websites, and I'll leave my email if you want to, I'll give you 25% off the cover and send it to you, because I get it much cheaper ordering the books myself and sending them out. So, but this is going to be a book that's more like the next subject after we went through the biblical and the Quran quotes about flat Earth is just basically flat Earth is. And I go through all these different arguments you're talking about. And another one, when they talk about the science, let's talk about the science. Let's talk about basic trigonometry. So here's these people that I got off the internet, and they did a test where they stood at two different distances, figured out the angle to the sun at the same time at noon, and got the trigonometry, and they posted it that the height of the flat Earth is 3,583 miles, which is exactly around the 3,600 miles that the ancient says that the sun was above us. Simple trigonometry. Two different points, measure the angles, find the third point. You learn that in sophomore in school?
Right.
Something like that. Go to Home Depot or wherever and get one of those thermal lasers. I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but there's a thermal laser you can do, and you shoot this little laser light, and it'll tell you the temperature, a Celsius or Fahrenheit. But go out in a full moon and measure the temperature in the full moon, and then go in the shadow of the moonlight and measure the temperature in the moonlight, and it's 4 to 6 to 8 degrees warmer in the shade. How can that be if the moon is reflecting the sun?
Yeah.
It can't be. There has to be something else going on. The moon's anomaly is what we really can blow up the whole story, because the moon is supposed to rotate and orbit, but we always see the same face of the moon. Well, think about this. If we're always seeing the same face of the moon, and the Apollo astronauts in their vacuum go and land on the moon, and then the moon is supposed to be 200 and 220 degrees, and then they go off a moonwalk for 2.5 hours, how hot is that LEM when they get back in it?
Yeah, it's going to be like...
These are the questions I ask. And then if you're on the moon in the LEM and we're always facing, the moon's always facing us, where would you look at as an astronaut to look at your Earth you came from? You'd look straight overhead.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah. Yep.
That's a thought logic, right?
Yep.
And then in the vacuum of space, which they never defined exactly where that is, well, vacuum is supposed to be a contained, the Faraday is contained in the glass. Einstein's theory of the elevator or the what's the other one he uses, the car, to prove motion. Well, excuse me, Earth is not a car. Earth doesn't have metal around it. And then you go into the system that I went into high school. Well, how do they teach them gravity in high school? And I don't know if you know this one, but they give them the can with water in it, and they have the guy standing in the middle with a rope, and he spins around with the water in the can. And that's showing how it's holding motions in.
Yeah.
What's the can?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. What's the guy standing in the middle? And then Eric brought up another one that's just another mind thought logic. Is the deepest we've ever drilled down is 8 miles with all our technology. How do they know the Earth's core is the same as the sun in a magnetic iron?
Oh, yeah. I brought that up on a show, too. It's all made up. It's all made up. It was the Russians, the Soviets at the time, they could only get 8 miles deep. That was it. And the way I read the story, Jamie, was no matter what they tried to do, no matter what technology they used, they could not break past 8 miles.
Right.
So something, in other words, there's a barrier there. Is the point we're trying to make, folks, is a barrier there. You cannot break through it. My
YouTube channel, plaintruth.info. It was about Admiral Byrd's Operation High Jump. And I just created my own timeline. I just did my own research. Wikipedia has some great stuff. You can glean from it some of the truth from not truth. But, here's this story about this 33-degree Freemason, 1946, right after World War II, 27 million GIs come back. And all of a sudden, there's this mass Operation High Jump put together in a matter of weeks where the commander, forget his name, of the Olympus, the task force commander of the entire fleet, said to Admiral Byrd in a terse letter, "I know not whichever mission, I know not if my men are prepared. What are we doing?" So 2 weeks before, he's supposed to leave with over 30 ships, including an aircraft carrier, including all these missions down to Antarctica. The Russians are going with them. The Norwegians are going with them. The Kiwis are going. There's this rush. They have to bring ships out of mothball right after World War II. I said, What is going on? So they go down on this 6 to 8 month expedition with 3 task force, the USS Olympus leading the way. They've got these sleds they're going to put up on. They paraded them through all the streets in Chicago and showing how they're going to discover Antarctica and everything like that. They came back, Mike, in 6 weeks. And then all of a sudden a story comes out of Chile from Admiral Byrd saying that he saw UFOs.
Right. Yeah, he was attacked by UFOs.
4 months earlier was the Roswell event. Anybody seeing a picture coming in here, folks? But something scared the living bejesus out of these guys, and it was called Operation High Jump, the Antarctic Circle with its ice walls. And so then they created the Antarctic Treaty System in 1958, where no one was allowed to go down there. Admiral Byrd died a mysterious death when he started speaking out, and they didn't like what he was saying. His son just died another mysterious death, Admiral Byrd's son as well. But he was a high-degree Freemason, and while he was down there, he was accompanied by a guy named James Van Allen. Well, how does James Van Allen fit into this? This is in 1961, and then they started Operation Deep Freeze, and every year thereafter, they went down the Antarctic Circle and started installing all the HARPA installations. Found that one. That's a whole other subject. But so they go down to and they find the dome, and all their technical equipment goes haywire, and they had all these deaths down there that weren't disclosed. I'm conjecturing all this. There's not a lot of evidence. It's just kind of circumstantial. But they bugged out, and they came back, and then they went down with all these ships afterwards until 1961, where the United States and the Russians, who were in this massive Cold War, we hate you, and all this stuff, get together and simultaneously take down the nuclear test ban treaty up in the sky. They drop it for 9 months, from June 1961 to November 1961. They did a thermonuclear testings with megatons and kilotons. These were big freaking rockets. They blasted up into the dome, and it was called Operation Dominic and Operation Fishbowl. And Dominic means our Lord in the heavens.
Think about how crazy that was. I mean, they were trying to blow a hole in the dome, right?
What if they did?
Well, yeah, well, you're right. I didn't think about that. Maybe I would think
part two, But that's maybe how they did the flood, how they just opened the heavens when we were getting too pippy of ourselves.
Bunch of psychos.
Same thing had happened to Atlantis, and they just bury us under a bunch of water. They just open one valve and we're done. I mean, that's where I think of us as far as our maturation of our intelligence as a species. We're not very smart. We've been dumbed down by professionals for a long time, but we're waking up very fast. And so, there's this wonderful story. But they did these operations. They did 49 thermonuclear tests, Operation Bluegill, and they had to do 3 more tests after the ones initiated because they couldn't get through. And I said, how high did they go? How high did they go? So I found the tests got detonated. They got ones as high as 6,000 miles before they detonated it. And they detonated down at 2,000 miles. So they hit something and they detonated it. And so they created the Van Allen belt. Then they tell us that the radiation, you can't get through. And remember, NASA still telling us today, you can't get through the radiation belt. Why have we never gotten to the moon? Because they can't fake it anymore.
Right.
It's just too much. I mean, and people should know that when 1969, what was it, July 20th, July 21st, well, I sat in front of the TV. I was 7, 8 years old. You may have been old enough to watch it. And everybody drank the Kool-Aid.
Yep, I was there.
And you realize it. Yeah, you learn later there was only 3 TV stations, ABC, CBS, and NBC back then, not 500 stations now. And there was one plug. They had to go all through NASA on one telecast that all 3 feeds got it from. And so it was broadcast to the BBC. So everybody saw the same picture from central planning. And this is my point. Central planning has been in charge. And so we have to have what I call new visions of much better ways. We have to be able to come up with these new ideas. But, getting back to Antarctica, do you know it's 10,000 feet of snow down there? Yeah, that's what Byrd said, 14,000 foot peaks with 10,000 feet of snow. It's a big snow block down there, right?
Right.
The Arctic's almost ice-free, according to the U.S. Navy now, because of all the warmth going on there. Well, think about this for a second. If Antarctica and the North Pole are on their backs 23.5 degrees, and half the time Antarctica is closest to the sun, not only that, it's closest to the sun in January, when on the ecliptic, it's 3 million miles closer than it is in our summertime. So what they're telling us is that the Antarctic, the coldest place on Earth, is closest to the sun by 6 months. And it's got all this snow. And the 3 hottest continents in the south are what? New Zealand, South Africa, and South America.
Right. It makes no sense.
You got to laugh. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
And then everybody's, well, you can go to Antarctica. Well, I did it thanks to Jeranism and a big shout out to Rob Skiba too. And he's got Christian backing and he does great research. I've learned a lot. That whole story about Admiral Byrd and stuff, that was on Rob Skiba's work. He brought the attention to me on that stuff. But we identified now how this dome theory could have how this whole thing got played all through NASA. And we've identified how they tested the dome and tried and couldn't get out of there. So then what happens in 1963, John Kennedy comes up and starts the space race. All of a sudden, the Russians are the bad guys again, right? How convenient. And here we go. And we've been on this horse ever since until, last year and a half. And those of us, the pioneers, as I call us, are speaking truth to power. And I think it's a genie they can't put back in the bottle.
What do you think? I know it's conjecture, but what do you think possibly that Bird ran into down there that made him scurry back home?
The electromagnetic field is so superior in its structure. I believe in Earth Gaia. I believe Earth is a living being. And I believe her energy force is so great that she can support the mighty oceans above us. So there was a tremendous, the equipment all failed down there. And the whole thing about the Operation Dominic and Operation Fishbowl, the first thing you read about is there are tremendous technological problems with their missiles getting high enough to detonate them. They had heck of a problems getting up there originally. So that tells me this electromagnetic field, this huge, powerful energy that all of us have access to if we only understood Tesla better, permeates, but it comes down somewhere in the dome at the Antarctic perimeters. It could be really far out. We have no idea. We have no knowledge, but I know that, Bird came back. I'd love to see Rockefeller's papers back from 1927. So they created this artificial story, and so they had to blow up the story. And I think, now we're at the forefront of this whole thing coming unraveled, but now we got to go take down NASA.
Yeah, I've heard an argument that said, and I don't know if I believe this argument, but I'm just throwing it out there. Do you believe it's possible that Kennedy actually thought that the moon was terrestrial, that you could land on it, that they bullshitted him?
I don't know. Well, I mean, the guy was so smart. I mean, he was so intelligent, and I believe he really cared about people, and I believe they took him out because he spoke truth to power. I mean, he knew what was going on. His dad was one of the boot runners with the whole prohibition. That's another story.
Yeah,
prohibition was not about people socially drinking too much. Prohibition was about Henry Ford wanting to use grain alcohol and hemp oil or hemp gasoline alcohol to run his Model A's and Model T's cross country. And Rockefeller wanted him to use fossil fuel. And that's another misnomer, fossil fuel. And, so he and Joe Kennedy created the whole bootlegging, industry, made a fortune and created the social prohibition of the 1920s. That's another myth.
The fossil fuels is another one.
Well, yeah, but the dinosaurs, and that's another thing Eric brought up. In 1847, the word was created. Now, think about it. So in 1850, it's like 12 years later, in Missouri, they find a tooth and they say it's a dinosaur. And then all these British guys from the British archaeology go around the world and all find stuff everywhere they look. Well, don't you think the Egyptians would have found something, or the Sumerians, or the Chaldeans, or the Toltecs, or the Mayans? Not one of them ever reported on a dinosaur bone.
Yeah. I know it gets so unbelievably weird. It really does. When you start breaking it all down, anything it's worth knowing is a lie. Period.
I go by nothing is true, everything is possible now. That's my motto. Nothing is true, everything is possible. So everything, if we don't know, and the preponderance of our human capacity of a brain is in the not knowing, I find security in the not knowing and investigating rather than the saying I know for sure, which I've been proven to myself to be wrong so many times I stopped saying it, and it just goes on. Here's another one, the Hubble telescope, just the math. And when you get into it, it's just so ridiculous. They say 63 light years away, the Hubble telescope saw the hot Jupiter prime target. Well, 63 light years is 370 trillion, 353 million miles.
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. It's absurd.
And then but I said, okay, so how do they know? So I said, okay, first I looked into the equipment and I said, what kind of equipment do they use? They use these radio frequencies or, microwave frequencies, and what is the hell? And you can't find much on it. So I finally found on Hubble how they knew what they knew. And it says, explaining the information was used to measure velocity, Loudon said. Loudon is the spokesperson for NASA. The relative amount of light blocked by different parts of the atmosphere changes. For the first time, we use this information to measure velocities on opposite sides of the planet independently, which gives us our velocity map. Orbits, velocity, atmosphere, water, Earth, rotation, what the planet's made of. And it's going 370 trillion, 353 million miles out, collecting the data and coming all the way back and then telling you everything about its existence.
When you think about, Jamie, when you think about the fact that, like, you just read that. Somebody had to sit down, or a group of people had to sit down and write that stuff and make it up and pull it out of their ass and then put it out there. And when you think about, and I'm not just trying to isolate it down to that, when you think about everything that's out there, that's a lie. Everything. It's mind-boggling what they put out there as far as their science, as far as their math, anything. Just pick something. It really starts to hurt my head.
Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, Guggenheim were the three richest men at the time. They had 30% more wealth than today's Ellison, Gates, and Buffett. But here was their mission statement, the first mission statement. It said, in our dreams, people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. The present education conventions of intellectual and character education fade from their minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into men of learning or philosophers or men of science. We have not to raise up from them authors, educators, poets, men of letters, great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, statesmen, politicians, creatures of whom we have ample supply. The task is simple. We will organize children and teach them in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way. We're just human resources since the 1900s for people, and it's hard for people to understand that.
Yeah, or they call us human capital. That's another nice, warm, fuzzy term that they use. We were talking about making this stuff up. If I'm not mistaken, wasn't it Arthur C. Clarke that first came up with satellites? He proposed satellite communication. That was in 1945. Right. So,
the science fiction, they create them, and this is what they do. And if you get into a lot of these guys that are scientists that work their way up and they do the science projects and they win the state and they win the nationals, immediately they're contacted by the U.S. Naval Intelligence, immediately out of high school. I mean, they go after these guys very early in life, get them indoctrinated. It's just like working their way up through the Freemason societies. They think they're doing good. They think they're doing great until they start getting stuff on them, some little dirt on them, having them, little escapade with one of their plants to get some stuff on them, and then they own them.
Yeah, they compromise.
Can't walk away because the money's too good, and then they own them because their morals have been compromised. And there's so many thousands and thousands of people, maybe they're listening to the show, that want to speak the truth, but their lives are going to be imperiled for doing that, or their jobs are going to be lost. I have no sympathy for somebody that would lose their job for speaking truth when it's hurting other people. None. If you're knowing you're hurting other people or hurting the earth like we're doing with geoengineering, and you're complicit by your silence. I'm sorry.
Let me ask you another question. Did you see a video that Russian Vids put up, I guess about 2 weeks ago or so, where he had a clip where William Shatner was doing the talk show circuit and he was talking about science being science fiction. Did you see that one?
No, I didn't, but he exposes a lot of that stuff. I like his work.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I pull his stuff onto the blog every once in a while, and there was 3 different occasions where they had, for those folks that don't know, that you've been living under a rock, William Shatner is Captain Kirk from Star Trek. And yet it was he was doing 3 different interviews, and he was comparing science to science fiction. I couldn't believe it. So I was sitting back and thinking to myself, well, so what's this all about now? What is this all about? Because Star Trek, by the way, the Rand Corporation had a huge part in cranking that up. So, Gene Roddenberry was a Freemason also.
Freemason. Well, yeah, in 1968, I was a Trekkie fan too. I wasn't a Trekkie, but I loved it.
Oh, I loved watching Star Trek. I loved it.
How did they know? How did they have plasma screens, flat screens on TV? How did they have phasers on stun, tasers? How did they have earpieces, communication devices?
Right.
Well, they've had Tesla technology, free energy, since the 1920s. I mean, they just piecemeal things up. But then on the counter that, we have ancient sundials that track the sun solely on a flat Earth, right? Here's another mind thought process. Go and Google 24-hour day and look at the image, how they divide up the Earth in 24 hours. And I offered $1,000 to anybody that could figure it. They divide it up evenly every hour as you rotate around the Earth, 1 hour, 2 hours, into 24 segments around the roughly 24,000 miles that Earth is, right? If we round that ball and wrap it up, what time is it at North Pole? It's on a globe. We're on a globe, right?
Yeah.
And there's 24 segments equal. What time is it at the North Pole where everything converges?
Okay. Yeah, okay. I got it. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No time.
And then another. There's no time at the North Pole if it's on a globe because everything converges towards a point at the top.
Right.
It can be 24 around the equator, which is all you'll see in any of the images you pull up in Google, but you'll And they're all flat maps, just like all the ship's navigators. What do they use on their ships? They use flat maps. What do the airline pilots use? They use flat maps,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really is gotten to the point now where it's comical to watch the whole heliocentric discussion go on. It really is. I've gotten to the point, Jamie, actually, where I pay absolutely no attention to it. Whenever somebody comes out, you'll see this a lot in the British tabloid press. It comes out and they'll talk about, new pictures of Mars, new pictures of the moons of Jupiter or whatever it may be. And I just sit there and I laugh. They continue to pump this crap out. And I just don't take it seriously anymore. I just don't. I just turn my attention to more important things. I'll tell you one thing about the flat Earth. What the flat Earth has done for me, and I'm sure it's done it for you, it has cleared so much clutter off the table. I used to focus on things like aliens and moon bases and stuff like that. What's going on Mars? Are there civilizations on Mars? I actually used to pay attention to that stuff. And then when I got into this and I figured out that stuff is all a bunch of rubbish, all that stuff got taken off the table. It was just clearing all the junk out of the way.
Remember Mike Hoagland, the guy with the Freemason flag on the moon?
Richard Hoagland,
yeah, where he had the old CIA guy, and now he's disclosing that the Masonics were on the moon and the Freemasons and everything. That's another honeypot hangout, as they call them. For us to go through there and talk about this stuff. But you got to stop saying words like solar systems and gravity and it's so ingrained in our common and planet. And so you're stuck, like when I'm writing this book, okay, I can't use planet, I can't use, and you find yourself, there's not a lot of words you can use because they're global, what word isn't global?
Right.
So you have to start changing your language and catching yourself, because you too, me too, speaking of myself, I've been indoctrinated into this language. And so it's so natural for us to come up that, what else was I programmed with is the natural next question when you start to understand that the things you're speaking is something that's been put into you for purposes not for your well-being, but for your mind control.
Well, and that's something, Jamie, the whole global nomenclature came about. It hasn't been around very long. I remember when UPS used to be called worldwide delivery. Worldwide. Right. Used to say it on the side of their trucks, worldwide. And then it became global. So at one time, the word world was used ubiquitously. And I would say probably over the last 20 to 25 years or so, the word global has really come to the forefront. But before that, people weren't walking around talking about global economies, global delivery. They were talking about world economies, worldwide delivery. So that's another thing, and because I'm old enough to know that, I can make that comparison. I have a baseline or a reference point. The people that are younger, obviously, they've grown up with the word global. But I found that very interesting because when I sat down and thought about it, I said, well, you know what? We didn't use global going back. I would say 20, 25 years ago is when it first came into play. Before that, everything was called worldwide. It's very interesting how the speaking patterns have been conditioned to exactly what you're saying. We've been conditioned to now speak their words, and we have to break that.
Well, and you see it in the programming, TV programming. That's why they call it that, right?
Right.
And when you see all the globes used in all the advertisements, all the images, and since that wonderful site, Vigilant Citizen Images.
Oh, it's a great site, yeah.
Yeah. And so he talks about images. And so a picture's worth of 10,000 words is what it really is the saying. And so the ancients, the Egyptians used hieroglyphics, and they told a story of 10,000 words in one picture. Like I said, we've got thumb drives. We're just expanding, our consciousness into this. And I was going to bring up a point for all people that are just coming on board and still researching. It takes time to unprogram your mind. And, it took me months to come around. Give people room. Just give them seeds. Plant seeds. This is the compost. This is when things are being destroyed. This is the Vishnu. We're planting the new seeds now. So I feel like Jamie Appleseed, going around and just planting these seeds in people's minds. Like, if the Earth is rotating around the sun and it's 12 o'clock in New York, will it be the same 12 o'clock in Japan 6 months from now?
Right.
Just thought logic about how that just simple things, and we've listed a whole bunch of things that should bring, people's minds to start questioning everything. If airplanes thrust pushes off air and submarines push off of water and boats push off water, what does the shuttle push off of?
A vacuum. I
A
know that's another thing.
vacuum.
I never thought about that either. And then I was watching some YouTube clip where somebody was presenting that, and a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, that's exactly right. What is it pushing off of?
Vacuum is space void of matter. The word stems from the Latin adjective vacus for vacant or void. An approximation to such vacuum is a region with a gaseous pressure much less than atmospheric pressure. So you've got to have boundaries. Yet NASA says there's no clear boundary between Earth's atmosphere and space. And then they make up this Kármán line that's 62 miles up where everything supposedly changes. And then they got the ISS space station trucking around in the thermosphere where it's 4,000 degrees temperature, traveling at 17,000 miles an hour in geocentric orbit. So those of you that say they see the ISS, think about the term geocentric orbit. It's overhead at the same spot on Earth all the time. It's geocentric. It's moving with the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour. You're not going to see it in Mexico and the next day see it up in California. It's on the same movement as the Earth, so it's at the same place. That's where they allegedly know how the satellites are. That's their story. And the only proof of the vacuum of space is the illusion of weightlessness. So how can it be weightless at 130 miles up in space and walk around where there's all this space debris of tens of thousands? So here we have these astronauts walking around while these space debris is traveling at 6,000 miles an hour, where one little piece of metal will kill somebody out there.
Going back to the vacuum, right? I mean, I'm trying to think now. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going back to when I was in school, but was it Newton's third law that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, right? I mean, that's
right,
so
right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Einstein's law of relativity. Everything's relative to everything else. Everything has effect on everything else.
No, it's really incredible. And one of the things I was going to say, just to kind of reiterate what I had said earlier, is that when we talk to people about this, it's important not to attack and, to be patient and be kind. Because like you said, Jamie, some people, it's going to take them a little time and a while for them to get acclimated and to basically shake off conditioning that they have had since the day they were born. So that's why I see sometimes I get really disgusted with when I see a lot of this kind of this fighting and this attacking and the name calling and the rock throwing on both sides, by the way. Okay. And I know one side likes to say the other side does it more, but that's a bunch of nonsense. I mean, they're both doing it and they're behaving like a bunch of children. So you have to sit down like adults, mature adults, and you have to have a civil discord. You have to be able to talk about this in a way that is conducive. It's productive to raising your IQ versus getting down into the gutter and trying to slug it out. So I just want to. I know I'm going off on my soapbox there, but I see that so much.
But think about what you're challenging in people's minds. You're challenging all the visions they've had from space, all the wonderment and awe that we're in this huge, massive world of billions and billions of stars and planets and solar systems and this big expansion. And we're part of this massive whole, and we've seen it on TV, and we actually met an astronaut once, and I went to NASA and I saw the Apollo. You're blowing the whole thing up in one try. It's too much for people to handle. You just have to take it piece by piece. So I just try and just make an offering here, an offering there. If they get it, fine. If they don't, fine. Don't take ownership, but just put these nuggets out. Now I'll have a book to start handing out. And I think that's just our work right now. It's just I think we're on to something very profound, and I think we've been blessed and honored to been this because we've wanted to know, and we've gone into the darkest of dark times to look and shine our Bics there, and we're finding this massive light that needs to be brought to the world's attention. And it's just your and mine and a few of these other good souls that are speaking out to change the minds of 7 billion people, Mike. That's all we got to do.
Yeah. That's an easy thing to do, Jamie.
Well, but we start with our children. I talk to my son now, and it's flat on the license plate, and the kids are calling him out at school. What does that mean? So I said, I have an apple farm. And I said, we're making a new type of apple. It's a flat, hard apple cider. If you don't feel comfortable, tell them that. I said, but if you're going to talk to them about what we're talking about, you need to know what you're talking about. So let's sit down and do that when you're ready. And so I just made that offering to my 10-year-old to not get him in the middle of this, because we can have others, you can have your lives destroyed. I lost a marriage over going down this hole. I've lost a lot of good friends. My family doesn't speak to me much anymore. It's part of the consequences of the truth movement. You have to give up some of this material world to gain the higher consciousness of this higher knowledge. And then when you have it, you can't sit on it because it's going to eat you alive, you've got to talk it out with others. And like you say, be patient. Give them room. Don't be holding that they have to get it because you need them to get it. If you think like that, you're gonna not get anywhere. It's gonna eat you up. It's just an offering, and that you have that knowledge over somebody else, and that you know more than somebody. Don't hold that over their heads. Don't talk down to them. Right. Everybody should have an equal opportunity to this information. And so when I get on my comments on my websites, I get attacked all the time, and I simply go, well, what do you agree with in the flat Earth? Since you have so many disagreements here, here, and here. And when I don't get a response, I just say bye. We have to find some middle ground in order to have a conversation if you're on one side of the fence and I'm on the other. So I'm looking for some middle ground. And if you're not going to show me any middle ground, well, here's my website. Just check it out for yourself.
The biggest mistake I made, Jamie, in the beginning was thinking that because I had stumbled on to something and I was doing the research, it piqued my interest, that other people would be receptive. That's the biggest mistake I made. I learned the hard way,
because you believe in people. You want to believe that we want to do the right thing, right? So we believe that people want to know. And that's, I think, a trap for us activists, is thinking that people really want to know.
It reminds me of the movie with Jack Nicholson, A Few Good Men, when he said, "You can't handle the truth." I think the Tom Cruise character said, "All I want is the truth." And then Nicholson's character said, "You can't handle the truth." And that's really how a lot of people think. So I agree with you.
Well, but if he did, it's too scary for them, because it goes up against everything we've been taught and everything we knew, and our parents and all the people we've had respect for. And then you're like, you're in your own world. You're like, I don't look at the world the same way anymore. Now that I have all this information that I've learned, I empathize with some of these great thinkers and guys like these guys in the 1850s, like Samuel Rowbotham, who went around for 8 years on the lecture circuit. And these guys were, these are our heroes. These are guys who were speaking truth to power 150 years ago. We're just climbing on the backs of Charles and Marjorie Johnson and some of these other great people, the terra firma guy, David Wardlow Scott. Those are the Hall of Fame flat earthers, and those are the guys we need to, and here's the other thing, Mike. I don't know about you. You can look on your statistics and see what the regions are around the world of people looking at your stuff. You ever do that? Yeah. On A Plain Truth, it's 83%, 85% men.
Yeah.
And my conjecture is when I talk to women about it, their comment is like, so how does that affect me?
There you go.
How does it affect my family? How does that affect what's going? Why does it matter? I hear that a lot. So why does that matter? It tends to come more from women. Men get in your face and want to challenge you, and then when they find out they have no idea of what they're talking about, you can't slam them. But women, they want to make sure that everything's going to be okay. That's the nurture nature of them. And bringing this up, you're bringing up this really ugly truth about who we are, but this beautiful truth about who we are. So it depends on what side of the fence. And so I find talking about the cosmology with women, I get them interested a lot sooner than the cosmology conversation with men.
So Jamie, look, this has been a fabulous discussion, and I loved it because it was just freewheeling, and we talked about whatever it is that came to mind. Did you want to talk a little bit more about when your book's going to be ready and when people can expect to read it?
If you don't mind just putting in when I get it going in the table of contents there, and if they want to go to my website, aplaintruth.info, and I'm going to give a discount. I'm not doing this to make money, folks. I just want to get this stuff out there. If you can't afford something and you want to get it a little cheaper, I'll mail it to you. Just let me know. But it's at APLANE truth.info. I don't know where you're going to be airing this, but I'm just sending it in for the first proof to start go over. So it's going to be about another 3 weeks or so. And then I'll try and start reading some of it on the YouTube channel as well. But hopefully it's something to raise our levels of awareness that we really are a being that we're not aware of how powerful and how beautiful we really are. And this comes from that great fall in our healing. I think this will heal a lot of people to understand that all this cosmos of creation, what I call theocosmology, is so centered around us. The stars really do revolve around us, folks, having a spiritual experience in this physical body. Onward and upward. What will we learn next? But, this thing is not going to go away, and I think it's just going to expand. And, I join the ride and salute you, Mike, and look forward to having more of these conversations.
Oh, anytime, Jamie. It's my pleasure. You do some great work, and you know that, and I've told you that before. And so we're just going to have to keep going. That's it. I mean, there is no turning back. Like I tell folks, once you learn the truth, no matter what it is, whether it be the flat earth or anything else, there's no going back.
Traveling is not going and seeing new places. It's seeing the same thing with a new set of eyes. And I think that's where we're at in our travels, is we're seeing, a new wonderful expressions of this wonderful creation we're involved in. We've just got some serious dishes to clean.
And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.